Hi everybody, it's John back with another model in box review. Got a very special kit for you today. Although it's not special boxing, it's a shame I couldn't get the original boxing. But today, the subject you're looking at obviously is a Supermarine Spitfire, but it's the mark of Spitfire that's interesting because what you're actually looking at here is a Mark 24. And the model I'm actually doing an in-box review on is the Revell rebox of the Matchbox Mark 22 and Mark 24 Supermarine Spitfire in 1/32 scale. The kit originally was released in 1976 in this type of boxing. It was quite an intricate boxing. Inside, when you open the lid, there was separate compartments for the sprues, an actual roll-up section for the instruction leaflet, and the decals went into the base of the box, and you usually had a little tiny compartment as well for the transparency as well. It was quite quite an interesting and quite comprehensively packed kit in its original guise. And I always liked the idea that it told you on the side of the box you had a fully detailed cockpit, and there's the instrument layout and controls layout of the interior of the aircraft, and all of that is actually in the kit, which is really nice. You also have a supercharged Griffin engine inside the kit, the detachable engine panel so you can see everything. It has a sliding cockpit canopy and 3 sets of service decals, so you can actually build 2 different variants of the Mark 22 and 1 variant of the Mark 24. And I remember trying to build this kit when I was quite a bit younger, and I'll talk about that in the summing up. Anyway, the kit was originally released in 1976 in this type of boxing. It's quite interesting because the first release of this kit, you had some information here and the word Marquee, and then you had some information written across the bottom edge of the box, and that's quite important to remember that for you guys that are collectors, if you're after a first edition box release of the Matchbox Spitfire Mark 22 or 24, that is how you tell the Mark 1 release, is by this little section of writing close to the edge of the box. In 1979, the model was released by the American agent AMT. This was the only time the American agent actually released this kit. It was never released in any other time in America. And the AMT kit is exactly the same as the Matchbox kit that you get. It's interesting here that he's got 2 sets of decals in this model as well, which is, you don't get 2 sets of decals normally. He's obviously picked up another set of decals somewhere. But the instructions were slightly different as well from the Matchbox model, and also the boxing was a different shape and everything was laid out in the box just chuck-in fashion. But you can see there the kit is actually a 3-colour moulded kit. It's a shame you can't see the 3rd colour, but I have got an image to show you what the 3 colours were, and we'll get to that in a minute. But that's a 79 release from AMT Matchbox, and then in 1980 you had the 2nd release from Matchbox of the Spitfire Mark 22/24, and again you can see here that the absence of the word marquee and this little symbol here it shows the difference between the 1st and 2nd release boxings, and also the lettering here, and there's some like model kit, marquee, model retweet, and Baz Ouch and all that stuff in different languages. It's actually a shorter text, but it's much further away from the edge of the box, which is quite, it's a very easy way of telling the difference between the 1st and 2nd release boxing of this kit. So 1980 went through to 1983, and this was the last rendition from Matchbox. The interesting thing about this particular kit is that they changed the Matchbox logo here and went back to the original format from the first boxing release, but they changed the colour of the Matchbox logo in 1983 and produced this style of logo, which was a bit more sort of vibrant. The word Matchbox and the actual the logo was a little bit more vibrant, and it was a bit more exciting basically, but everything else about the kit was exactly the same. The 1983 then went through to a later release, but this is just to show you the 3 different colours of the sprues that you got in the kit. There's the original transfer sheet, If you're going to build a Spitfire Mark 22 or 24, I would opt for the model that I've got rather than an original Matchbox release, because the decals are far better and the kit has actually fared pretty well. The mould, yeah, the mould's quite old, but I don't think the mould has suffered in any way, shape or form. And I think if you're going to build a kit, I think you're better off getting the Revell release, because the decals are far better. And the kit is exactly the same sprue wise. But in the original sprue colours, you had 2 sprues of black plastic, 2 sprues of light grey, and a sprue here of, it looks to be like a grey green, but it's not actually, it's just a slightly darker grey to this colour. It's more of a sort of, it's similar colour to the camo grey pattern that's on the Spitfire. It's not actually green, it's just the way the colours sort of come out on the picture, which is a bit of a shame. Anyway, that just shows you the image of the sprues, and then you've got the Revell release, and this is the model that I've actually got. And in my opinion, I think if you're going to build this kit, this is definitely the one to opt for. The decals are far better. Plus there's 3 options, 2 Mark 22s and 1 Mark 24, and none of them are foreign. They're all REF. Maybe from different areas of the world, but they're all REF and they're nice. They're really nice markings. So anyway, that's the boxing history. The Revell kit was released in 2007, and it's still on general release. You can get it now in the shops. It's quite easily obtainable, and it's a beautiful kit. You should, if you fancy something a bit beefy looking and a Spitfire, this is definitely the one to go for. Right, this is an image here of an F Mark 22 that's actually on the flying circuit in Europe, and it's flying here at Legends at Duxford. There's actually a PR Mark 19 in the background in front of that DC3 in the back there, you can see it. There's several DC3s in the background as well. The interesting thing about this image is that the aircraft is actually done up in the livery of Johnny Johnson's fighter, which Johnny Johnson did a lot of training for the RAF. Trained fighter pilots how to be fighter pilots after about 1942. And he did a very distinguished service career in the RAF, even after World War II. He served in the RAF quite a while, but he was the highest scoring RAF fighter pilot with, I think he had 26 kills in Spitfires. Maybe more, don't quote me, maybe more. I'm pretty sure it's 26. Not the highest scoring Allied pilot, but that's pretty high for a fighter pilot in the RAF. Anyway, we'll just pan the camera down now quickly to this lovely kit, and it really is a nice kit. I have to admit, it really is. Actually, let me try and get this camera a little bit further up and down. There we go. That's a little bit better, isn't it? There we go. Oops. It's trying to give me grief, this camera stand. There we go. Right. The box is quite big. It's quite a sizable box. Obviously the kit inside is quite big. On the front image, it's a very nice image of this aircraft. I love the artwork on this particular kit. It's very, very nice indeed. Lovely, really incredibly well painted. The artwork is fantastic. It's got a super decal sheet inside, and you'll see the decals on it. They are absolutely fantastic. Some images on the side here. You can see the images of the kit made up. You've got a beautifully detailed Griffin engine. There aren't many model Spitfires with Griffin engines in them. Not many at all, but Matchbox, I'm pretty sure, had the first one released in the 70s when this kit was released. You got a sliding canopy and a pilot figure, very nice. Open and closable gun ammunition bays there, and a detailed rear tail wheel, and it just gives you an idea what the kit looks like when it's built up. There's no other information on the sides or backs of the box. Sorry, on the back of the box. You've got some adverts for different kits that they sell. I'm sorry, I'm having to like scan this across here so you can see the different adverts. The box is so big, and the accessories there you can get. And this is what's interesting. This symbol here, this is a Revell marketing symbol, and When Revell took over the marketing rights of Matchbox, you always found this symbol on their kits, even in the when they were still selling Matchbox kits in 2 and 3 colours. This was how you found that the kit was actually being marketed by Revell and not by Matchbox. And eventually, of course, Matchbox succumbed to Revell and Revell bought them out. Just open the box. There is quite a bit in here. Sorry, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. I don't know what's going on. There's quite a lot of bits and pieces in here. But we'll do the inbox review like I normally do. I'll put the box on the floor there because I don't think there's room for everything on here. And we'll just turn that over and we'll have a look at the instruction leaflet first. The instruction leaflet is typical Revell format. It's A4 in size, but there are a lot of pages. On the front page you've got information in German here and information in English here about the Spitfire Mark 22 and 24. And there is some information also about the original Spitfire prototype and information leading up to the last 2 marks, because the F22 and F24 Spitfires are actually the last 2 marks. Well, were the 2 of the last 3 marks made of the Spitfire. The F23 was also an apparent mark, but not many people know much about it. On the second page, you've got just basically general safety instructions and some little boxes here, hints and tips at the bottom. That's a feature that Matchbox and Revell used to do, quite common. And then you've got some build icons for the instructions, quite easy there to follow and understand, and some safety advice at the bottom there, quite easy. The kit itself actually builds up in 51 steps, and there's quite a lot going on in each step. Normally when you have lots and lots of steps, there's normally only about 2 or 3 parts to put onto each kit, into each stage. But with some of these steps there's actually lots to do, quite a bit to do. On the left hand side you've got a paint guide. I'm not a great fan of Revell paint guides because they often ask you to mix colours, which is never a satisfactory way of doing paints if you ask me. I actually think you're better off using paint colours that were purposely built for that particular job, and then refer to reference material on the internet for colour guides for various parts of the kit. You've also got a parts plan, which is a thing that Revell used to do and still do quite a lot. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of parts there. There's a lot of sprues in this kit. Quite a lot to do. And then in section 1, you're basically putting the engine block together. Well, sections 1 through to section 4, you're basically building the Griffin engine. It's quite a simple construction. There's not, Matchbox kits were simple construction. Even the quite large models like this, they were quite simple construction. And then in section 5, 6, 7 and 8, you're basically building bits and pieces and accessories for the engine that go in the front section of the fuselage. And then in section 9, 10, 12, 13, you're building the interior. And as Matchbox kits go, the interior on this kit wasn't that bad. You've got to remember it was a 1978 moulding, and there wasn't a huge amount going on with interiors, even on the 32nd scale models that Revell released. They weren't terribly detailed interior wise. And in section 11 there, you're just putting the pilot together, and there's a paint guide to tell you. There's paint guides actually throughout the entire construction to tell you what colours to paint various bits and bobs as you're going through the build. In section 14, 15 and 16, you're basically putting the tail wheel assembly together and some avionics to go inside the cockpit. You can see there, that's the instrument panel. I think that's a glycol tank behind the instrument panel. And then in section 17, 18, 19 and 20, you're basically fitting everything inside the fuselage halves. And the pilot and assembly and everything goes into there quite easily. And then you've got the forward bulkhead, which was built in part 15. That's the forward bulkhead. And that forms the bulkhead between the fighting compartment and the engine bay. And then in section 20 you're just marrying the fuselage halves together. And there's an option there for undercarriage tail wheel up or tail wheel down. This aircraft does not have retractable undercarriage, it has fixed but two different alternative positions for the undercarriage. Then you're building the rudder in section 21. 22 is the tail empennage, and then you're putting everything together in the tail empennage there in 24, and that gives you a plan view of what the tail empennage should look like. There's 0 dihedral on the tail plane. And then 25 you're basically putting the rear sliding canopy assembly together. 26 you're putting a few bits and bobs onto the interior of the cockpit and the cockpit door, part 53 there. And then in part 20, section 27 and 28 you're building the gun bays that house the 20mm cannons. Yep, this thing had a serious punch to it. And then in section 29 you start building the wings. And the wings on this kit are actually quite detailed. There's quite a bit going on. You've got a separate part there for the lower fillet, and then the lower wing halves join to the fillet. And then you put the the main spar parts into that section of the lower wing. And then you put the gun bays into the upper wing parts in section 30 and 31. And then in section 32 you just marry everything up. Giving you a paint guide there for some of those parts as well, which is good. Section 33 you got the removable panels for the gun bays. I probably wouldn't bother putting them in actually. They're saying they're optional position. You can either glue them in or not glue them in, but I would have them removable. And then you've got the spinner in section 34, which is yeah, there's quite a bit to that as well. Section 35 you're marrying the wings to the aircraft, and again they're telling you to put the airframe into the slots provided in section 35, and then in section 36 you're putting the fillets into position, and they will need to be jigged into place. And if you've got some proper jigs rather than pegs, I would use them, because that was one of the parts that really threw me when I was a teenager putting this thing together as a Matchbox kit. I bought it as a Matchbox kit. In 37 you're putting the engine mounts into place. Personally I would be tempted to glue the engine mounts to the engine after you've painted them, and then glue the engine mounts to the forward bulkhead there, rather than do it the way they're telling you to do it, because you'd have to splay those engine mounts apart, and I think you'd get a better result if you used the fuselage as a jig but glued the mounts to the engine. Section 38 and 39 you're putting the undercarriage assemblies together, quite easy. And then section 40 you're building the propeller blades. You're putting the propeller blades into place, which yeah, that's quite easy, isn't it? Section 41, 42 you're putting the cannons together. There's 2 long and 2 short cannons. And then section 43 and 44 are just cowlings and oil and radiator coolers. Quite easy, you can see it there, no problem whatsoever. And then you go into section 45, which is where you put the engine together. And there you go. Section 45 you're putting the engine exhaust mounts, which form the upper runners for the engine mounts. And then you put part 46 in all of that together. Maybe you might have to put the engine in at this stage, I'm not sure. It might become apparent at the time. And then section 47 and 48 you're basically just finishing bits and bobs off with the cannon, fit, propeller, all of those radiator cowlings, coolers, and the cowlings around the engine. No issues. And then in section 49 you've got the optional position for the undercarriage. You can have it either up or down. And section 50 you're putting the tail wheel assembly doors into place, either open or shut. And then in section 51 you're putting the canopy assembly into place with the canopy that slides, and you obviously clip that over the sliding section of the fuselage. You can see it works. And Yeah, that looks quite easy and no problem to follow. Section 53, 54, sorry, 52, 53 and 54 are the three different options you can make from this kit. That's a Malta base 1948 Spitfire Mark 22 in RAF service. Nice looking, it's a nice looking aeroplane. It's very, very powerful looking aeroplane. This is probably the version of the kit I'll be building, this one, which is a Mark 22 City of Manchester auxiliary flight, Royal Air Force, based at Ringway in 1949. The reason why I like this particular kit is I've actually got a photograph of this actual aeroplane flying. It's also available. You can get it on the internet. It's available on the internet. It's quite a small picture, but it's nice to see an image of the real aircraft, of the kit that they're actually done the markings to copy off. And it does look very, very, very nice, very powerful looking aeroplane. And then you've got your third option there, which has stripes on the wings and fuselage, and that's the only F Mark 24. The interesting thing about the Spitfire designation marks is that up until about 1945, they were Roman numerals denoting the mark of the Spitfire or whatever aircraft it is what the RAF were using. And then in 1945, late 1945, they actually changed the way in which aircraft in the RAF were marked, and they went over to numerical sequence, and you ended up with an aircraft, instead of being called an XXII, it would be called an F, which stood for Fighter, Mark 22. And this would, of course, have been an F Mark 24. So the proper designation for this aircraft is actually an F-24, and the proper designation for this aircraft is an F-22. So they are sort of half right, which is, you know, that's okay. You go over the page and it's just, you know, you've got sections at the back here in blank for builder's notes, and all you IPMS guys, you know what builder's notes are for and why they're important to competition building. Anyway, that's the instructions. The instructions are quite comprehensive, and then you've got the decal, and this is why I'm saying that if you want to build this kit, get the Revell option, because the decals on this kit are absolutely fantastic. Now, there isn't a reference on here to cartograph, but they just scream cartograph at me. You've got sections of decals here which are common to all, which is nice. And then you've got the actual markings themselves, and the register on these markings are fantastic. Look at those crowns. Really, really nice. You've got the nose steps and the wing trestle markers there. Fin flashes. They're beautifully cast, really nicely set decals. Very, very nice indeed. And the register on them is fantastic. The depth of the decals is actually quite pronounced. They're quite a pronounced decal, but then the kit is actually quite large. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. You know, that wouldn't really worry me too much, I'll be honest with you. The parts, the parts are interesting to say the least. I'm going to try and pull the parts out in one go, which isn't easy because, no, I can't get it. The plastic is really tight on this kit. We'll have a look at that in a minute. I'll just put that down there. Transparencies. I'm going to open these up because I want you to see the level of quality that you got on the transparency from Matchbox in the 70s, because that's when these kits were originally made. The moulding is actually made from that era, and I'm hopefully going to be able to show you the PK number, because the Matchbox PK number of this kit was PK-501, and it was the first release in their 32nd scale aircraft, their green range. Now, the transparencies, as you can see, the transparencies on this kit are very nice. They're really nice, actually. When you think that this mould is ancient, it's from 1978, and that's really good. I'm very impressed with that. There's no reference here to Matchbox. Yes, there is. There is a reference to Matchbox. There it is. Can you see there? It says PK-501. That is the PK number relating to the Matchbox release when it was released in 1978, all those years ago. And Revell haven't removed the PK numbers. And I'm really glad they haven't, because I think it's part of the kit's history to keep it on there. And I think it would add, even for collectors to collect the Revell kit, it would add to the interest of this particular model. The first sprue we're looking at is the sprue that has the upper wings and the wing fillets and the tail plane. Well, one of them anyway. And it's just really to show you the depth of detail in this kit isn't great. I'm going to be honest with you. The actual features, the lines on the wings, they're pretty typical of Matchbox. But for me, it doesn't distract from the awness that I have for this particular model. And I'll tell you why in the conclusions when I sum up in a minute. You've got the blister panels there. They're going to be removable in this kit. And these are the fillets that gave me so much trouble when I was a teenager, and I'll tell you about those soon as well. But these parts I'm going to be honest with you, they're pretty run-of-the-mill, but it's the particular Spitfire that interests me more than anything else. That's the Griffin engine block and part of the cylinder head there. Some other bits and bobs and tail planes. There's the lower section of the wing there. And again, the detail, the panel lines and everything. I mean, you know, it's interesting to note that the panel lines are actually recessed. Yeah, 1978, recessed panel lines. Tailplane, recessed panel lines. Actually, that one I think is raised. That one's raised, but these lines on the wings are recessed, all of them, which is nice. The wings on the lines on the upper section of the wing are raised. So that's interesting. You've got a mixture of raised and recessed panel lines, which is quite funny, really. There's one of the main spars for the lower section of the wing that goes in. There's the other one. And then you've got the undercarriage. Quite nice detail on the undercarriage wheels there. Not too bad, is it? Tail wheel. Let's just turn that over so you can see it. You know, it's not that, you know, it is basic detail. There's not a huge amount of detail in these parts, and they're not intricately moulded. But I don't think it's going to matter, because it's a Mark 22, Mark 24 Spitfire. The propeller blades quite nicely cast. Don't think they're going to need much cleaning up. They look quite good. I'm a bit concerned about these spindly undercarriage legs, though. They look a bit narrow, don't they? But I suppose the plastic is quite thick on them. Got some internal runners here. One of the issues I did have with the internal O-rings is that they're not drilled. There's normally, with the Spitfire, you'll have loads of holes all the way around here to feed the cables and things through to the back of the fuselage, and they're just not there. They're just solid, which is a shame. But more modern releases of Spitfires definitely have those drilled holes, which is nice. Very, very large spinner there. The spinner's quite massive, isn't it? Engine cowlings at the top. There's the fillet. Yeah, pretty much run-of-the-mill, the parts on it, aren't they? Not much to write home about. There's the rudder. Yeah, that's not bad. All of the control surfaces on the Mark 24, Mark 22 Spitfire were metal. There was no fabric covered control surfaces on this kit at all, not on this aircraft. Probably because they needed metal control surfaces, because can you imagine the malformed canvas control surfaces at the high speeds this thing used to get up to. Fuselage halves there. It's a nice touch that you've got like a fuselage half that, you know, stops short of the engine cowlings, which is great. I like the look of that too. Nice recessed panel lines on there. Yep, that looks quite nice. I'm quite impressed with that. And then you've got, Bill. There's a pilot in this kit, and he's quite nicely detailed, isn't he? He's as good as any other 32nd scale pilot I've ever seen in any kit, whether that be Revell, Hasegawa, anything. He's as good. He's very, very well detailed. He's got lots of straps, even on his back. No problems there whatsoever. There's not a lot of other parts. Again, you've got no holes drilled through this section here, and the pedals are actually built into this particular part. You've got an instrument panel here. I can't remember if you've got decals for the instrument panel. I think you have. I can't remember. Yeah, you have. You've got proper decals for these instrument panels, but I always find that if you've got detail of dials on these instrument panels, it's virtually impossible to get the decal to lie properly. So I usually paint them, and they usually paint up pretty well, and I'm not expecting to have an issue with this one either, because it's quite sizable. The guy's hand there, quite nice. Yeah, some avionics, the pilot seat and the top of the engine there, the top of the Griffin engine. It's quite beefy, isn't it? Seriously powerful engine, the Griffin. Yep. So that's the parts. Parts look pretty good, don't they? I think I won't put all that away because it actually takes quite a long time to put everything away. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to read the gump to close this video down. There are a number of options and costs, but they're not as abundant as you would think for a Spitfire model. Whoops, sorry about that. I keep knocking this camera. Right, the model we're actually building and reviewing today is the Revell Supermarine Spitfire F Mark 22, F Mark 24. The kit's original release date from Matchbox was 1976, but Revell released this kit in 2007 and it's still available on the shelves nowadays. It's moulded in 1/32 scale and its serial number is 04704, but the original Matchbox PK number was 501. There are decals for 3 versions. The first is a Spitfire Mark 22 from number 73 Squadron at RAF Tarkali in Malta in 1948. The second is a Supermarine Spitfire Mark 22 of number 613 Squadron, RAF City of Manchester flight, based at Ringway in 1949. And the third is a Supermarine Spitfire F Mark 24 of number 80 Squadron, RAF Kai Tak, based in Hong Kong in 1951. Now, the model, obviously, is quite big. It's about 12 inches long. It has a 14-inch span and it sits about 3-ish inches high on its undercarriage, maybe a couple of tads higher than that. And the model comprises 126 parts on 5 grey plastic sprues and 3 parts on 1 clear plastic sprue, containing 129 parts total. Now the options and costs, as I said, there are a few, but there's not as many as you'd think. The smallest scale you can buy a Mark 22 or a 24 in is 1/72 scale. An Admiral do a Spitfire Mark 24 retails for about £15 to £20. Airfix do a Spitfire F Mark 22 which retails for £12 to £20. And there's a company who build resin kits called Checkmaster Resin. They build a Mark 22 and 24 and that retails between £20 and £30. Hawk did a Mark 22 Spitfire many years ago. You can still get that kit if you hold out for a price. You can get it for often £7 or £15, but I have seen it go for as much as £40. MPM did a Spitfire Mark 22 which retails for £10 to £17. Pegasus do a Spitfire F Mark 22 and 24 for £4 to £7, and Ventura, they do a Spitfire Mark 22 which retails for £17 to £22. Now, some of these kits have been reboxed by other companies. AZ Model do a Mark 24, which is the old Admiral kit. That retails for £15 to £20. Daedalus Models do a Spitfire Mark 22, which is the old Ventura kit, for £20 to £23. Jay's Model Kits build a Spitfire Mark 22, which is the Ventura kit reboxed again for £15 to £20. And Special Hobby do a Spitfire Mark 22/24, which is the reboxed MPM kit, and that retails for £16 to £20. Testers did a Spitfire Mark 22, which is the old God-Awful Hawk kit, for £9 to £14. And Extra Kit do a Spitfire Mark 22, which is a reboxed MPM kit, and that retails for £6 to £15. You can get a Mark 22 and a Mark 24 Spitfire from Airfix in 1/48 scale. That model retails for £11 to £37, and the pro builders quite like that kit. They think, although it's not as detailed and reasonably basic for a 48 scale kit, it's pretty accurate. And also Edward do a Spitfire Mark 22 and 24, which, believe it or not, is a reboxed Airfix kit for 25 to 30 quid. In 32nd scale, Matchbox obviously do the Spitfire Mark 22, 24, and that retails for £16 to £50. And Matchbox AMT, who did the Rebox Matchbox kit for £8 to £22. And Revell obviously build the Mark 22 and 24, which is the ex-Matchbox kit, for £6 to £24. Conclusions. Now then. I remember building this kit when I was about 15, and it just beat me. I ended up putting it in the bin because I just couldn't assemble it properly. It's not a kit for the younger generation or novice builder. It is a reasonably tricky build, and there is quite a lot of panels that have to be fitted into place absolutely spot on. And if they're out of alignment, it throws everything else out of alignment. And that's the reason why this kit beat me as a teenager. But with lots of detail, even for a Matchbox kit under Griffin engine, it can't be bad. The surface detail is a little lackluster, but that is what Matchbox kits were like. But the 20mm cannons are present with opening panels for the gun bays. So looking forward to getting this thing underway, and I hope I make a better job of it than when I was 15. I hope this video has been some use. If you have any queries, questions, anything, just pop them in the comments boxes below, and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as possible. I know there are a number of Matchbox connoisseurs out there. My friend in Birmingham is probably one of my favourite Matchbox connoisseurs. So I've just knocked the camera again. And I hope if you haven't got this kit, you can follow the build and see how it turns out. Maybe you fancy building it yourself, I'm not sure. But as I said before, if you want to build this kit, get the Revell option. If you want to collect this kit, go for the Matchbox option, or even the AMT kit. It's quite interesting to see the different size boxes. So anyway, that's the review finished. I hope your modelling projects are running really smooth, and thanks for tuning in. I'll see you for the next. Bye bye for now.